Welcome to Go a Little Mad, a horror movie podcast. My name is Jason, and I love scary movies.
I'm Briana, and I don't. And this week we watched Scream.
Hello?
Hello?
Who is this?
You tell me your name, I'll tell you mine.
I don't think so.
What's that noise?
Popcorn.
You making popcorn?
I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Someone is playing a deadly game.
It all began with a scream over 911.
Someone who's seen one too many scary movies. Now he's taken his love of fear
Hello, Sydney.
one step too far.
Do you like scary movies?
What's the point? They're all the same. Some stupid killer stalking some big-breasted girl who can't act, who's always running up the stairs when she should be going out the front door. It's insulting.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a scary movie. Number one, you can never have sex. Never, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back. Get another beer, you want one? Yeah, sure. I'll be right back.
He didn't make the rules.
Police are always on track. They watch prom night at same time.
He just kills by them. Don't answer the phone. Don't open the door. Don't try to hide.
Everybody's a suspect.
You're not scared, are you?
Scream.
The trauma. The trauma was brought up in more ways than one.
By trauma, do you mean like the best part of your childhood?
No. I mean the absolute worst.
I think we experienced this movie very differently when we were younger.
For sure. Movie credits. This was written by Kevin Williamson, directed by Wes Craven, and starring Neve Campbell as Sydney Prescott, Courtney Cox as the real villain, or Gale Weathers. I'll get into that later. David Arquette as Dewey, and Skeet Ulrich as Billy, the world's worst boyfriend.
You know, it's really refreshing to hear you say that about Gale because, you know, I think we've been saying for a long time that the media is the enemy and we can't trust a word they say. And, you know, I feel really happy that you finally come around.
I guess I was going to say it's not just because she's the media, but you know what? It might be just because she's the media.
She's absolutely the media. So did you hear the story of her casting? Did you come across that in your research at all?
Yeah, I had it somewhere in here that, well, I wanted to call her Monica throughout this entire thing,
No.
obviously.
That would be so disrespectful to her and all that she worked for.
Well, yes, because, and the reason why I didn't was because I learned that she purposefully took this role because she wanted to play a bitch so that she could get away from being Monica.
Yeah, I think, you know, around the time this was like being made, everyone was just feeling sorry for her after having broken up with Adam Duritz. So she wanted to like be
Wait,
like, oh,
is that
I
Counting
have all that
Crows?
power. Yeah, that's Counting Crows, but I don't know when they broke up.
Okay.
I was just joking.
But wait, also her bestie dated him. Who dated him first?
I don't know. That seems like something more in your area than mine.
We'll have to fact check that later. Oh, he's fact checking it right now. Who dated Counting Crows first?
Oh, he also dated Trishelle from The Real World.
What? That's a fact.
Here
Okay.
are people he's dated. Emmy Rossum,
Wow.
Trishelle, Samantha Mathis,
I don't know who that
who's
is.
an actress, Christina Applegate,
What?
Mary Louise Parker from Weeds.
What?
Yeah, let's see. Courtney Cox, 1997. So it was actually after Scream that they dated. Jennifer Aniston, 95.
Ooh, so Jennifer got him first.
Jennifer came first. He dated Winona Ryder in 94. Monica Potter, who I don't know if you know who that is. She was like an actress in like the early 2000s. I had the biggest crush on her.
Wait,
I thought she was
she's
so pretty.
blonde. I think she plays a mom in something.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, she's like mom age. Laura Flynn Boyle.
He dated everyone.
Yeah, well, that's the end of the list. So, I mean, who else?
He dated
Who knows?
everyone who was anyone in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
Counting Crows.
I mean, have you heard Long December? It's amazing.
I was just going to say it's because of Long December. But
Yeah, great song.
Okay, well, good for him. Good for him. I'm glad we solved that mystery.
So what were we talking about again?
I think a movie called Scream.
Oh, so nothing to do with Counting Crows.
Of course not.
Okay.
Tangents are fun. Tangents are fun. Let's get us back on track with the synopsis. After a shocking double murder of 2 high schoolers, the small town of Woodsboro, California, deals with the aftershock and the continuation of a terrifying serial killer knocking off his next victims.
You know, it seems like small towns are really just like the worst place to live in a horror universe.
I think they're just the worst place to live.
Yikes, let's cut that out. Don't want to alienate some listeners. I'm just saying, they specifically had to make like Jason Takes Manhattan because nobody was dying in the big city.
Wait, is that a real movie?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a Friday the 13th movie.
Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it sounds like.
I've never even heard of it. Not even like a... Wow.
Well, you know, my namesake, so...
When was this? Like the 90s, the early 2000s?
Yeah, I feel like it was the early 90s, maybe like 91, 92, let me look. 89. It was Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.
By 1989, there were already 8?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now I understand a reference in the review that I'll have later. Okay, wow.
Great, can't wait.
So talk about your Rotten Tomato score and Flesh Wounds.
Rotten Tomato score is 79%, which is criminally low. Like, this is a 100 movie,
Okay.
But 79%. So Flesh Wounds. I hope you guys enjoyed last week when we talked about the others, because I am similarly loaded up with things to talk about today.
Good.
There's just so much to dive into with this movie. It's been around forever. It was, it's iconic. A lot of famous people involved in it, whether they were famous then or are famous now, more so after it. So lot to cover here. So the first is the inspiration for the movie itself. I don't know if you had read this, but it was actually inspired by a real-life serial killer.
Yeah.
Called the Gainesville Ripper. Now, Briana, you may actually remember the Gainesville Ripper, as we were listening to a podcast about him, and we actually had to turn it off partway through because it was so graphic.
It's this one?
It's that one.
No.
Yeah. So the Gainesville Ripper, for those of you who aren't familiar, his name was Danny Rawling, and he killed 5 people in the early 90s during a murder spree, mostly taking place in Gainesville at the University of Florida, hence the name. He was known for particularly brutal murders. He did some really awful things to his victims. And the most notable thing was that he would kind of pose them in very disturbing ways for maximum impact when they were discovered.
I literally still think of that from time to time, completely randomly. And we only listened to about, of the actual discussion of that podcast where they're talking about like the meat of it, 5 minutes, I feel like.
Yeah. You didn't make it too long. And the only reason he's even notable, the only reason I even bring him up here, is I find it really interesting because he is, you know me, I'm kind of a true crime buff. A lot of people who know me know that. He's one of the more brutal serial killers of like kind of modern time in terms of what he did to his victims. And it's just interesting to me that pretty much nobody knows who he is compared to somebody famous like Ted Bundy, who was also a piece of crap, but isn't quite the monster in the same way that Danny Rawling is. So that kind of makes you think about maybe like there's a line, like he is too much of a monster for people to talk about.
Yeah.
This guy's just disgusting. And the last thing about Danny Rawling, not that I ever want you to listen to any podcast but our own, but my favorite podcast, Last Podcast on the Left, does a great series on him. If you're a true crime buff and you have a bit of a stronger stomach and you like to laugh, I definitely recommend checking it out. But again, strong stomach recommended. Briana listens to some of the true crime stuff with me, but even this one was a little too brutal when they got into the details of the crimes.
Way too brutal. So let me just actually expand on that point about...
No, this is my time.
about the inspiration. It was specifically for the beginning scene with Drew Barrymore. Did you read this?
I did not.
Okay. For Williamson, he was watching a special on the Gainesville, Florida murders. That's all it said, the thing that I was reading, so I didn't know what that was. I was too scared to Google it. Happy I did not. But he said to CNN, I was getting so spooked, which makes perfect sense now. During the commercial break, I heard a noise and I had to go search the house. I went into the living room and a window was open. I'd been in the house for 2 days. I never noticed the window open. I got really scared, so I went to the kitchen, got a butcher knife, got the mobile phone, and I called a buddy of mine. Then that friend just started asking him about scary movies, and I think not being very helpful, but ultimately helpful because this went on to create a very successful franchise. He had nightmares that night. He woke up at 3 a.m. and wrote the script for Scream over like the next 3 days.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, that friend sounds like kind of a douche. But
Totally.
on the other hand, he's probably the reason Kevin Williamson is a millionaire. So
Right.
can't be too mad.
All right, what's your next fact?
Well, so my next fact involves the producers a little bit. So I'm just going to get into this right off the top. Harvey Weinstein was involved in the production of this movie.
Yeah, I figured.
The Weinsteins, him and Bob, Dimension is their label.
It is?
Yep. Dimension Films is the Weinsteins. It doesn't dull my love of the movie as much, but it certainly leaves a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth.
I mean, it's going to happen. We're watching older movies. It is what it is.
Exactly. So the working title of Scream was Scary Movie.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, which is notable for two reasons. The first, obviously, being Scary Movie, the spoof that came out a few years later, that spoofed horror in general, but largely Scream, which, I mean, is funny because this is kind of already a spoof.
Yeah.
But yeah, so do you know how they got the name Scream? Did you read this at all?
I think so, but I don't remember.
So they were actually going to push forward with Scary Movie. They had already had a bunch of marketing stuff made up. They were getting ready to come out with it. But then the Weinstein brothers saw a music video.
Oh, yeah.
With Michael and Janet Jackson titled Scream. And that inspired them to make that the name of this film.
Not to give them any credit for anything ever. But, well, first, calling it Scary Movie I think is funny because it's meant to be referential, the entire film itself. And calling it Scary Movie means going into it that they know what they're doing with this. It's meta. But then even calling it Scream is the same thing, but better, I think. It's elevated a little bit, slightly less obvious, but still referential.
I agree. And, it's funny. I do think that the title Scary Movie was a little too on the nose.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I feel like this movie definitely has, you can group people that have seen it into two groups, either people that understand that it's a satire or people that are actually scared of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with viewing it as a actual scary movie. But I think with the title Scary Movie, it might not have gotten as much, quote unquote, real slasher cred.
I totally agree because the Scary Movie franchise, calling it Scary Movie is exactly perfect for what it is. It just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's just a shame everything after the first one was terrible. My next one, I've got 4 more.
Nice.
The film opened around Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yep, Merry Chrysler. To very little fanfare, actually. It was up against Jerry Maguire, which, if you've never seen that movie, turn off this podcast, go watch it right now. It's classic. Love Jerry Maguire. And Mars Attacks, which in hindsight,
oh my God,
terrible movie, but it was a very high profile movie. Tim Burton, lots of people. I mean, terrible strong. It's a fun camp movie now. It's definitely one of those so bad it's good movies, but at the time it did not land well. But anyway, it went up against those two opening weekend. It only made $6 million opening weekend against a budget of about $15 million.
Oh.
But what happened was word of mouth. People that did see it talked to all their friends about it, talked about how much they loved it. The movie ended up staying in some theaters for up to 8 months.
8 months?
8 months, and it made $170 million at the box office.
That's crazy.
After opening for 6 its opening weekend. Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that really cool? Next one's very short, kind of obvious. Caller ID sales tripled following the movie's release.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
I read that too, and I just wasn't sure if it was true, and I was like, I feel like I would need to Google more to see when they came out, but it makes perfect sense.
I mean, who cares if it's true? This isn't a thesis. Nobody's grading this. I don't have to cite my sources. Those of you who've been listening probably know we both do a good amount of research into the film after we watch it, but before we record. And when I'm looking for my flesh wounds, I typically try to look for stuff that Briana hasn't also come across, because I like to kind of tell her things along with you guys. But this one, I know that she almost definitely read this, but it's just too good to not include here. The very first scene with Drew Barrymore.
Mm-hmm.
She, during most of that scene, was actually dialing 911.
Oh, I didn't read this.
No, okay, so...
What?
Yeah, so the prop master had forgotten to unplug the phone the actress was using. And she actually called 911 a number of times, much to the confusion of the operators. She would dial 911, she would scream, hang up,
God.
911 again, scream, hang up again. He said they were in the middle of one take and the phone started ringing. They're like, why is the phone ringing? On set. And it was the police asking what the hell they were doing and why they keep calling 911.
I read somewhere like the tail end of that, the police part, and I was like, I don't understand why the police are calling. So that makes sense now. That is hysterical.
Yeah. Can you imagine like that 911 operator's life that day? Like that is terrifying.
So stressful.
But, again, like 5 years later, great story for that person to tell. The last one that I've got is just about Matthew Lillard, who I'm a big fan of. I don't know why.
Is that Scooby?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean Shaggy.
Shaggy. I'm a big fan of him, no particular reason. I just feel like everything he's in. He was in 13 Ghosts, which is definitely something we'll cover on this podcast at some point. And he's just like a fun guy. So he played Stu. Most of Stu's lines, best lines, were actually ad-libbed by Matthew Lillard.
Oh.
There's one part towards the end when he's like getting caught. He's like, my mom and dad are going to be so mad at me. That was ad-libbed by Matthew Lillard.
Oh, that's funny.
But the fun fact is that he absolutely hates his portrayal. He absolutely hates it. He gave an interview in 2015 at like a convention, and he said, quote, "I was horrible. I got lots of gums, big teeth, and a really tiny fucking head," end quote. So not a fan of his own performance, but he's iconic in this movie.
I mean...
Yeah, no, lots of gums, tiny head. He's not wrong.
It's a lot.
But it's great.
Yeah.
He's over the top, but he is exactly what the role needed. So that's all I got.
All right, those were good. So let's talk about our experiences with the film. And we both have experiences this time because, unfortunately, I have already seen this. And it's unfortunate because I didn't want to see it. And the story is kind of clouded. And I don't know if it's because every memory I ever have is clouded or if it's just trauma and I have clouded it for protection. And it's not that bad. I'm obviously making it sound bad, but...
You? Dramatic?
So this came out in 1996. I was 10. So I did not see it, obviously, at that point, but I did know that this movie existed before I saw it. My cousin Sage, shout out to her because I know she listens, is really similar to Jason because they love scary movies, and in fact, this one is one of her favorites, at least at the time. When we were little, I used to sleep over her house like all the time. As I grew up, I moved away, like I slept over less. But for some reason, I think in like 1999... I slept over her house. And the reason why I think it was 1999 was because Scream and Y2K are one thing in my brain. So I was like 14 or 13 in 1999. I slept over her house for some reason. She really wanted me to watch it. And I was like, no. And then she convinced me and I said, fine, but you have to tell me every time something scary or disgusting happens. And let me tell you, she failed right away because I definitely saw the boyfriend's guts fall on the floor and Drew Barrymore hanging from a tree with her stomach outside of her body. So I was not happy. And it's funny that you mentioned that there's some people who watch this movie and know that it's satire and others who are scared. The first time I saw this, I was just afraid. I didn't get that it was funny. I obviously didn't get any of the references, really, except for the very obvious references, because I had never seen any of those films, and I still haven't seen most of those films, but I'm older now, so I get it. And then that night, I was sleeping on the couch, and my uncle came home in the middle of the night, or maybe 10. I don't know when it was. But I was so afraid when he walked through the door. I was like in the dark, just staring at him as he walked through the room. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's just my uncle. It's fine. So I think it was in December when I watched this because I was afraid for Y2K for all of the lights to turn off and then the killer was going to come and get me.
That is just impressive, like mental gymnastics.
Now, Sage will not probably be able to confirm or deny this in any way because I don't think she'll remember this because it wasn't a memorable moment for her whatsoever. There was no trauma. She had seen the movie a billion times. But yeah, that's my Scream story. Oh, and then also Boy Meets World. Whenever they did that one episode.
Iconic episode.
I hate that episode.
We will do a whole episode of this podcast devoted to that episode. I swear we will. So good.
And at some points during...
just for anybody that's listening, it's called And Then There Was Sean.
Yeah. At some points in this movie, when like the killer is like creeping around in the bushes and stuff, and it reminded me of Boy Meets World because the killer or whatever in Boy Meets World is doing that same thing, like creeping around, and it was fun to get it, I guess, thinking about Boy Meets World. But yeah, I still am afraid of all of it, so
That's funny. Most people like saw Scream and understood the reference in Boy Meets World, but you saw Boy Meets World first and didn't get the reference until you saw Scream again.
Yeah, I mean, I knew what it was referring to, but I also remember thinking that in Boy Meets World, the person was Ghostface, and you kept telling me, you're like, it's not. He's not actually wearing the Ghostface mask. And I think we saw it or something, and I was like, oh, you're right, it's not. But in my memory, it's full on same thing.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus, and I think after we had that discussion, I like immediately turned it on and made you watch it. It's like, I will prove it to you. I have this episode memorized.
So I'm sure have lots of memories, so go ahead.
I do. So this is a very, very important movie to me. I've talked several times about how my uncle who lived with us was a big horror movie fan. He had a bunch of old horror movies. I mean, not even old, but like at the time recent, like it was the early 90s, and he had Freddy Krueger and Jason and stuff, but he had all these VHS tapes. So I had watched a bunch of scary movies up to the point when Scream came out. And I did see it in the theater, which, I mean, I was 9.
No.
So like, I don't know who signed off on that. But I don't remember who I saw it in the theater with. I actually have a very specific memory of seeing Scream 2 the following year in the theater in Florida with my other uncle. That was probably like the last time I spent any meaningful time with him too. So that was 24 years ago. But this one I don't remember where I first saw it, but I definitely saw it in the theater. And it was an instant favorite of mine because like my uncle introduced me to all these classics, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, Jason, all these things that everybody knew and they kind of existed before me, but this one was mine. Like this one came out when I was coming into my own. This one was like my horror movie. And I still just have a very soft place in my heart for this movie. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't say anything bad about this movie at all.
Were you scared? You
No.
were 9 and
No.
you were not scared. Are you kidding me?
No, not at all. There are 2 scenes in this movie that I remember having kind of like a visceral, like uncomfortable reaction to. And that was one that you mentioned when the boyfriend in the opening scene, his like guts are like spilling onto his lap.
Yeah.
That made me uncomfortable. And then, funny enough, the scene with Tatum in the garage,
Yeah.
just when he slices her arm with the knife, it's just such like a clean, like,
Jesus.
yeah, that made me so uncomfortable. The doggy door death, Drew Barrymore hanging from a tree, Billy getting shot in the head, like nothing else, but like her getting sliced in the arm, it was just so clean and realistic, and I hated it.
Okay.
Yeah, but nothing gave me nightmares or anything. Just a little gore made me uncomfortable.
So let's talk about it then.
Let's talk about it.
The first thing I remember seeing is the Dimension Films logo. And once again, that is just traumatic for me because I remember I feel like they made so many scary movies in the late 90s and early 2000s. And they always showed that logo in the trailer. So I was always like, oh, cannot watch this right now. Cannot. And would change the channel or close my eyes or whatever.
All right, so here's some Dimension movies just to throw it out there. The Crow, 1994. They acquired the rights to Halloween, and starting with the 6th Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, in 1994, they released all of the Michael Myers after that. From Dusk Till Dawn, Scream was really what springboarded them, and then they did the sequels. They did Phantoms, which was a great movie. That's one we might have to cover.
I don't know what that is.
Phantoms.
Did they do I Know What You Did Last Summer?
No, they did not do I Know What You Did Last Summer. They did Halloween H2O.
Oh, okay.
And Spy Kids.
Oh,
so
very scary.
Yeah. Oh, they also did The Others, which makes sense because we just talked about Harvey Weinstein last week.
Yes. But they didn't show the logo there. And you know why? Because it doesn't fit the film.
Fair enough.
Okay, so we begin with a phone ringing. There's no real credits at all. It's just boom, scene.
Yeah.
It's Drew Barrymore.
So casual.
My bestie Drew. And it's that voice, which is triggering for me. And right off the bat, I remember thinking, okay, this feels very weird to be watching because when I watched it the first time, I hated it. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm never watching scary movies. And now here I am, however many years later. And I'm just like coming around to scary movies. And here I am watching Scream again.
Time is a flat circle.
The call is kind of innocent to start, almost like, oops, sorry, didn't mean to call you. But he keeps calling and the tension grows with each call. Although it's flirtatious kind of too, to begin.
Oh yeah, for sure. She at first is like, oh, this guy is so mysterious. And he is like, this girl I wonder what her insides look like.
Yeah. And she's just kind of aimlessly walking around the house. She's going to make popcorn. They talk about like movies and if she has a boyfriend and whatever. And by the way, she's walking around and locking doors as she goes. Some doors that she passes, she locks. Others, she doesn't. Maybe the door's already locked. Maybe she doesn't care. The bottom line here is this one level of the home has about 75 doors on it. And that's 74 too many.
Yeah, I mean, when you see all the other houses in this movie, though, it almost makes sense. Like, these kids all live in mansions.
Right.
Yeah.
Mansions
let me ask you,
that are all apart from each other.
Let me ask you real quick, though. You ever make Jiffy Pop?
No.
This movie made me terrified to make Jiffy Pop.
So you were scared, just of not the right thing.
Yeah, no, I wasn't scared of getting murdered while making Jiffy Pop. I was just afraid of starting a fire.
Did a fire even officially start? It just smoked.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. It was, like, fully on fire when her parents got home.
And yet the home remains.
They had to, like, they dumped it in the sink and then sprayed it with the fire extinguisher.
So he eventually asks her name. She says, "Why do you want to know my name?" And he says, "Because I want to know who I'm looking at." And she's kind of like, "What?" And he corrects himself, "Because I want to know who I'm talking to." Now she locks the door out to the pool area. And my point of this is rule number 1. You should just, first of all, your doors should just always be locked. We've said this before, I'm sure. Because that's just how it is. All the doors should always be locked.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just, like, paranoid or something, but, like, the second I come in my home, I lock the door behind me.
Yes. But also, you're kind of vaguely creeped out by this stranger on the phone. Every one of those 75 doors should be locked immediately. There's no reason for this.
One really funny part about this conversation, too, is they start talking about scary movies.
Yeah.
Obviously. And they talk about Nightmare on Elm Street. She says, yeah, the first one was good, but the rest sucked. And the really funny thing about that is, obviously, this was directed by Wes Craven, who directed and made the first Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh.
He didn't direct any of the rest.
I didn't know that.
He did eventually come back and direct Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but it's also, like, it's very meta. Like, it's Freddy, like, haunting, like, the set of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So, like, you can't even really count that as Elm Street canon. But yeah, so I felt like that was a little self-dig by Wes Craven there.
That's funny. On the 4th call, it gets scary for Drew. He's threatening and telling her not to hang up, and she's just now finally locked all the doors. And she starts crying, like, "What do you want?" And he says, "To see what your insides look like."
Yeah.
Bye.
Before that, though, there is one part where she almost hangs up, and he delivers one of the most memorable lines in the movie for me. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to imitate him. I'm going to do it in the voice, okay? "You hang up on me again, and I'll gut you like a fish."
That was pretty good.
That always stuck with me, and I don't know why.
Don't ever do that again, though.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But, by the way, this is why I don't have a landline, other than the fact that no one has landlines anymore.
I was about to say, you don't have a landline because it's 2021.
No
and you're
one
not
needs
80.
a landline, and no one needs to ever pick up a phone call from someone who you don't know. Like, if you don't know the number, don't pick it up. Lesson learned.
I mean, I'll go a step further. You don't have to answer your door if it's someone you don't know.
Oh. I didn't even say that because we're millennials, and that is understood. That is a fact. As she freaks out, she threatens him with having a boyfriend, and he's like, "Is his name Steve?" And then Steve is tied up by the pool in a pool chair, and he makes her play a game or he dies. You know, the whole, like, "Do you like scary movies?" thing, although he said that to start, but no, I fucking do not. So game over. Once again, I'm hanging up the phone. We're done here.
Well, as I just covered, he would gut you like a fish.
No, right now it's just you would die. I'm still alive. You're the one tied by the pool.
Got it. Okay.
It's every man for himself.
Apparently.
He starts quizzing her, and he asks her to name the killer in Halloween. And she doesn't know, despite the fact that when the conversation was flirty, she's claimed that that was her favorite movie.
Yeah, but I mean, she's under duress.
I know the answer.
But would you know the answer if I were tied up on a dark porch and there were a murderer on the phone telling you he'll kill me if you get it wrong?
Yes, that's the time to be have the most clarity.
Like, in theory, that's the time when you want the most clarity, but I'm not sure it's the time you have the most clarity.
Maybe. But then he asks her, I think she gets it, right? Then he asks her to name the killer in Friday the 13th, and she guesses Jason, but he says that's wrong because he gets her on a technicality. Apparently in the original, it's Jason's mom.
It is Jason's mom, yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so my question is, though, like, what if she got that right? Does he just leave?
Movie over.
Well, not movie over, because, I mean, he's got to go through with the Sydney thing, but, like, does Drew Barrymore live to see another day if she knows that it's Mrs. Voorhees?
No, he would just get more and more obscure eventually. Because
Okay.
he wanted to do the murders.
Fair enough.
The mukdak. But so she gets it wrong, and he's dead. Guts everywhere. By the way, Drew is very good at being the dramatic, scared girl.
Oh, yeah, she is incredible in this scene.
Yeah. Then he asks her another question, what door am I at? Great question. There's about 45 options. Oh, and this is where, so the voice on the phone is not actually any of the actors. It's this guy named Roger Jackson, and he never met any of the cast. Did you read this?
I did, yeah.
He never met any of the cast because Wes Craven wanted to keep it scary and mysterious for everybody. And apparently, initially, it was also going to be dubbed over. But then they listened to it, and Wes Craven was like, no, this is perfect. It's like a memorable voice. Like, we're going with this.
And also, the phone calls in the scenes are actual phone calls. That's how, like, that mix-up happened with Drew Barrymore's phone being plugged in, is in those scenes, the voice actor was in a different part of the studio actually on the phone with the actors and actresses and actors during the scene.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I've learned from the Office podcast that they don't always do that. That's, like, really hard to do, I guess.
Oh, yeah. It's normally not. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah. Ghostface throws a chair through the patio door, so I guess that's what door he's at.
And that was Brianna's first gasp of the movie, by the way.
Oh, was
when
it?
When that chair came through. Oh, no.
And Drew runs and grabs a knife in the kitchen. Eventually, through one of the many doors in the kitchen, she, like, slips outside, and she sees him creeping around the house, which was so scary. I did not like him creeping. I don't like when he creeps around. She spots a car coming, and I noticed that she seemed relieved, but I didn't really get why, but we learn later that it's her parents. She gets up to run, and he catches her. They kind of scuffle, like, he comes out of the window. She fights him, which I was happy about, but then he stabs her in the chest. Then he slashes her neck. It's not looking good for Drew. She watches her parents walk into the house, and she's trying to, like, get to them, and she's trying to call to them, but, you know, her larynx is shredded.
And that is such a good, like, that is a legitimately unsettling, like, scene and
I
idea.
didn't like that. Where,
you know, like, you are 10 feet away from your parents who can save your life, and you can't say the words to let them know you're there, and you just watch them walk in the house. Like, that is, I'm getting the chills just thinking about that.
That's like nightmare stuff when you're, like, running and running, but you can't get away, or you're calling out, but you're not actually yelling. Oh,
100%. Yeah, when we're done with this scene, I'll go into how much I love it, but that's just one of the many, many reasons this is a great scene.
So she watches her parents walk into the house. She can't yell to them. She collapses. He stabs her a bunch of times, all while her parents are inside, who begin to notice that something is awry, let's say. They pick up the phone to call the police, but Drew is still on the phone from all the phone calls earlier. And they essentially hear, like, her last breaths, which is kind of sad. Her dad tells her mom to go to the Mackenzies. And I originally wasn't going to say anything about this, but apparently this is the same thing that Laurie tells Lindsay and Tommy in the original Halloween.
Yes, it is.
Like I said, I missed that because I don't know these references, but I appreciate that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there are a few Halloween references. You might have read Billy Loomis. Dr. Loomis was the name of Michael Myers' doctor in Halloween as well.
Well, unfortunately, Dad's suggestion was the worst because upon opening the front door, they find her hanging from a tree, very dead, with guts on full display. To wrap that up, gross, but not as gross as when I was whatever age I first saw this. Less traumatized.
Yeah, I would say most things are less scary at 35 than 13.
You never know.
Yeah. I'm biased. This is my movie, right? Like, this is probably my Desert Island movie, like, if I'm being honest.
Oh my God.
So, again, take my fandom with a grain of salt. But this might be the best opening scene in a scary movie. If it's not the best, it's definitely among the best. It's so good. It sets the tone for the movie. It's really memorable with Drew Barrymore because you're like, oh, it's Drew Barrymore, cool. And then she's dead 30 seconds later. I don't know if you read this. Drew Barrymore was actually going to play Sydney originally, but had to pull out because of scheduling conflicts. But they got her this scene, which I think was a great scene. As like this scene wouldn't have been as good with an actress we didn't know.
Right. Like Nev Campbell got to go on and do the others, but this is iconic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I can't say enough good things about the scene. The shot of her hanging from the tree, her parents' reaction. Her parents really sell this, man. So I just am like, this is, 10 minutes into the movie and I'm already gushing.
Yeah.
And I will say, though, the first scene was a little harder on you than I think the rest of the movie ended up being. I think you were maybe in your own head a little bit.
For sure.
You were very nervous and very on edge throughout the whole scene. And like I even have it like in several spots in my notes. I was starting to feel bad because I'm like, this movie is a comedy to me. I'm like laughing. I'm like giggling and clapping my hands. And you looked so uncomfortable and I felt so bad. But you did start to warm up.
Yeah, well, I told you, like, watching this, it felt like I was revisiting something that, like, I didn't want to revisit. Not to really say that it was traumatic. There's real trauma out there, and I don't mean to be making fun of that in any way. But, like, just thinking about something that I experienced and I didn't like, and now I'm here again watching it. And I kept telling myself, like, I'm going to watch this with fresh adult eyes who has now seen a few scary movies under her belt, and it's going to be fine. But also, I don't like killer things. That is one of my bugaboos. But yeah, I did relax. So next we meet Sydney. She's on a computer and she hears a noise. She kind of looks around and her boyfriend surprises her in the window. Now, he just looks like a killer.
Oh yeah, he is creepy as hell.
I don't remember if when I saw this the first time, if I felt that same way, and to be honest, I didn't 100% remember who the murderer was. I know I said a couple times, like, I think it seems like the boyfriend because he's the murderer, and I think there's more than one, but I couldn't fully remember. So when he came through the window, though, I was like, you're the killer. Yeah,
and Skeet Ulrich does a great job with this. I also read that Joaquin Phoenix was almost cast in this role.
Ew, no.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was much younger then. It wouldn't have been like today's Joaquin Phoenix. Also, Melissa Joan Hart auditioned for the role of Sydney.
Absolutely not. Sabrina, no.
Yep. Melissa Joan Hart auditioned, and they offered the role to Reese Witherspoon. She didn't even audition.
Yeah.
And she turned it down because she didn't want to be in a scary movie.
Yeah, well, Reese Witherspoon is just, she's Legally Blonde, and like she's so sweet seeming, and she's played bitchy sometimes, but I do not see her ever playing anything like this.
Well, I mean, again, this is, at the time they're making this, it's 1995. She's not Reese Witherspoon yet.
No, but she's still going to be that same way, like,
right. What I mean is I think it'd be easier for us as an audience to see her in that kind of role.
I guess. For me, seeing this now, I would have been like, what is she doing here? Yeah. It just doesn't fit.
But it's okay because she got to work with Joaquin Phoenix and Walk the Line eventually, and nobody got stabbed in that, so.
Yeah. And actually, I read that they specifically picked Nev because they felt like she could toe the line between nice girl and girl who survives the crazy killer.
Final girl. They're called final girls.
I didn't know if we were calling her that because I didn't really know the rules around final girl. So fresh off a double homicide, here he is. Sydney's dad interrupts them, but she is like, it's fine, leave. And so they're alone again. He says that he was watching The Exorcist and it got him thinking of her. Okay, bye. It was on TV and all the good stuff was cut out, just like how they started off. They were hot and heavy, and now they're edited for television.
Yeah, he said they were a hard R headed for an NC-17.
I hate this boyfriend so much. So he's a murderer because he's not getting any.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Billy would definitely not survive in a post-Me Too world. Like, even if he weren't a murderer but had the same personality, he would not do well today.
I wrote multiple times, like, this is a 90s teen movie is what I'm getting here. She lets them, like, fool around for a little, and after a quick flash of her boobs, and it's, like, playful, like, he leaves.
Everyone likes a good playful flash of boobs.
And next day at school, there's police and news everywhere. Okay, let me just talk about Drew Barrymore, and really the entire cast here. Even though her boyfriend was wearing a varsity jacket, I just didn't really put together that Drew Barrymore was a high school student until it was her parents that came home and I realized, oh, she's a child. None of this cast looks young enough to be a high schooler. None of them. Now, granted, no, high schoolers never play high schoolers. I think maybe now they do a little bit, but like in the 90s and early 2000s, it was always like 22 to 26-year-olds playing high schoolers. So I get it. But you would think now I'm older than like Neve Campbell was. I think she was like 23 when she played this 16-year-old. You would think I would look at her and think, yeah, she looks young. But I actually think they all look incredibly old.
The funny thing, though, is Drew Barrymore, depending on when it was filmed, was either 19 or 20 years old.
Are you serious?
Yeah, she was born.
It's her hair.
She was born in 1975.
It's her hair and the makeup.
Yeah, no, she definitely had that like short 90s hair that made every girl in the 90s and 80s look 40.
Yeah, yeah.
And let me just add, by the way, like, poor Steve.
Who's Steve?
Thank you. Exactly. This is the epitome of, like, missing white woman syndrome. Nobody gives a shit that her boyfriend was killed. All anybody talks about is Casey.
Well, he didn't even have a line.
He had a line. It was...
Exactly. We also catch a glimpse of Courtney Cox, who is looking cute, but very Easter Sunday.
Cute. Did you see her bangs?
I liked it.
Oh,
she looks cute. Well, you know why I liked it? Because it wasn't those short bangs that were like pixie cut bangs that she has in the other movie. She does that in one of the other ones.
I know.
It's ugly.
It is.
This was great.
This isn't better.
In class, Sydney is staring at an empty chair, presumably Drew's chair, Casey, until she gets called into the principal's office because the police are questioning, although you would think they would need their parents present, but they're questioning them. We meet the principal, who is played by Henry Winkler. What a treat.
He absolutely kills this role.
He
No
really
pun
does.
intended. He is a highlight of the movie.
Sydney knows one of the officers or deputies. It's Dewey, but he corrects her and says, it's Deputy Dewey because he wants to be treated seriously.
Deputy Riley.
Oh.
It's Deputy Riley today, Sid.
Yeah, that's right. I definitely just wrote Dewey. The conversation is brief and cuts to the quad with Cindy, her bestie Tatum, Tatum's boyfriend. What's his real name?
Tatum's boyfriend?
Stu.
Matthew Lillard.
Stu.
Oh, you said real name.
Sorry, because I called him Shaggy through the entire thing.
Stu. Yes, his name is Stu.
And the fifth wheel, Randy. Oh, and the psychopath, Billy. By the way, Shaggy, I looked at him and I was like, I recognize him. And what did I say? I was like, he plays someone dumb in something. And you were like, Scooby-Doo. And I was like, yes. Boom, he is Shaggy in my notes. Although sometimes I did call him Scooby.
Yeah, and I love this scene. Like, I just gotta say, like,
I hate this scene.
The whole interaction between him and Randy. Like, first of all, Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy, is one of my favorite characters in scary movies. Like,
because he's you.
Yeah, I mean, he's me. He's the audience, is what Randy is.
Yeah.
He's literally the person that's laying down everything you're watching as you're watching it, and I just love that. It's funny. This is probably right behind Malibu's Most Wanted, the peak of Jamie Kennedy's career, and I think he just absolutely slaughters it.
I didn't recognize him at all. I only recognized later when I was reading names. I was like, oh, that's Jamie Kennedy, which I just know that he does comedy. I don't know any of his
he
work.
had like a whole like show.
Yeah.
But then there's a scene between him and Stu where they're kind of like playfully, everyone's accusing each other of being the killer.
Yeah.
Randy says I think it's Billy accusing him of being the killer. He's like, I heard you put her liver in the mailbox. Did you really put her liver in the mailbox? And that's just another line that always stuck with me. It's making me laugh just thinking about it.
So you're laughing and I'm like incensed. I'm like, these stupid assholes, they're being so insensitive. Because that's how I would be if this was real life.
Wow, good thing you don't have to live with somebody who copes with trauma using humor. And I'm just a forewarning. This whole like episode is just going to be every scene at the end going, I love this scene so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to gush this whole episode.
So later, Sydney gets off the school bus, and this is where I noted that she looks 25 getting off of a school bus. But her house is beautiful. But everyone lives remotely, which is what I was trying to say earlier. So Casey lives remotely. There was like nowhere for her to run. Sydney also lives remotely. And then the house we go to later at the end of the movie is also in the middle of nowhere. And just how does everybody in town live in the middle of nowhere?
Like I mentioned earlier, all of these houses are huge. And I will say, like, this movie, if it were made today, and I guess we'll find out later this week because they're doing another one.
Which is why we covered it this week, by the way.
But the one thing about this movie, like, it worked at the time. Obviously, I love this movie. But when you watch this movie, again, with those 2021 goggles on, this movie has zero diversity. This movie is about a bunch of rich white kids just getting murdered. And, like, I feel like today's audience would go and be like, fuck those kids. Like, those characters aren't as sympathetic today without any of the diversity that actually happens in real life. I mean, not that there aren't places like that, but you know what I mean.
So she's on the phone with Tatum, who is played by Rose McGowan. She's walking around the house. She's kind of, like, locking things up. And she's planning to stay with Tatum because her dad is going on a business trip. And, you know, there's a killer on the loose. So from this conversation, I don't think she explicitly said it at this point, but this is where I was like, okay, her mom's not around.
They talked about it in the principal's office. They talked about what happened to her mom.
Really? I wasn't paying attention at all.
Shocker.
Yeah, no, I totally missed that. She goes around collecting things to pack. She sits down to watch television, or because Tatum isn't coming until like 7. All the stations are covering the murder, and one of them brings up that about a year ago, her mother was raped and murdered. That's a fun story.
I do have to say, I was like, when we were watching this, I was kind of in that mindset of like, all these kids are like so rich, their houses are so big. And I did kind of revel in the fact that like all the money in the world still bought them like a giant, shitty 70-pound TV that had a terrible picture. Because that's all that existed back then.
She leaves the TV, she leaves the TV room, and she hears a creak in the hallway, but ultimately ends up falling asleep on the couch. And it's like sunset now. Like, just walk to Tatum's house. Just leave. Like, what are you doing? She's awoken by the phone. It's just Tatum to say that she's on the way, and she hangs up, and immediately it rings again. She thinks it's Tatum, but it's the murderer. Of course, she thinks it's Randy playing jokes. Now, friends playing jokes like this, we're not friends anymore. We're not friends. Just FYI, to all my friends out there. And you. The voice says, "It's not who I am, but where am I?" She turns the lights on to look outside. I would never. She taunts the psychopath. I would never. She's like, I'm going to call his bluff. He's not there. So she says, where are you? And he says, right here. She peeks out further. She like peeks around the wraparound porch. And then she goes back inside. She says she's going to hang up and says that if you do, you'll die like your mother. And this makes her take it seriously. I guess she realizes that Randy's not that much of an asshole. She runs inside, but Ghostface jumps out of the closet.
When Ghostface jumped out of the closet, you made a noise. I don't want to call it a yell. I don't want to call it a gasp. It was more like, ah.
That seems accurate.
That's actually like literally phonetically what I have written down here. That's the noise you made.
Well, he knocks her head pretty good, but as he gears up to stab her, she kicks him pretty solid. I was happy with that. She runs upstairs after, by the way, saying on the phone with the killer before how ridiculous it is that the girl always runs up the stairs when they should be running out the door. She blocks the door with her closet door, which is so brilliant. She picks up the phone to call 911, but it's dead. So she uses her computer? Question mark?
Yeah. So this was my thought too. Like, if the phone's dead, this is 1996. So, I mean, how is she connected to the internet?
But wait, how can you even make phone calls through a computer?
She didn't make a phone call. She like went to like 911.com or something. She was typing. She was typing to 911.
I know, but how? Is that real?
Yeah, you can absolutely access 911 online.
What?
But again, the real question here is, how is she online if the phone line is cut?
Right, because AOL.
Exactly. But I just told myself that they're very rich and they have a dedicated internet line.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
they have 2 phone lines.
Yeah. If you had that kind of money, why wouldn't you?
She realizes he's gone. So, okay, she's okay. But then conveniently, Billy climbs through the window, her boyfriend. And she's so relieved, and she hugs him. And in the hugging, a cellular phone falls out of his pocket. Now,
a cellular telephone.
I forgot to say at the top, drinking game alert for everybody. Take a shot whenever you hear us say the word cellular, okay? Because it was said a lot throughout the movie, and we could not help but laugh.
Yeah, and as we were watching the scene, we both just kind of laughed at the idea that, like, him having a cellular phone was scandalous at the time.
It meant something. She was like, why do you have a phone?
Yeah, and not to get too far ahead of it, but even, like, the police, when they're interrogating, like, now, why would you have a cellular telephone, son? It's ridiculous.
It's no Zach Morris phone, but it is pretty big. She's deeply unsettled by this. So she runs away from him. She runs downstairs and attempts to leave, but in opening the front door, she's greeted by Ghostface. Really, though, it's just Deputy Dewey holding it up because he found it outside. They arrest Billy, and Tatum finally arrives. So does Gail Weathers, because she's like a goddamn ambulance chaser. At the station, the cops are all like, like Jason said, what are you doing with a cellular phone? They've told him that they have to keep him until the phone records come in. Gail shows up at the police station because she's so aggressive. And meanwhile, the cops find out that the costume is just a run-of-the-mill costume, so there's really no way to trace it.
I love it because it's called like Father Death.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
I love that name because it's if they made a Scream movie in like Germany, the killer's name would translate to Father Death.
Yes. So by the way, this really is a run-of-the-mill costume. It was apparently found on a shelf by a crew member who was scouting locations. And by the way, I hate when anyone dresses as this character for Halloween. I do not like seeing this mask ever. Dewey asks the sheriff, do you think he did it? And he says, 20 years ago, I'd say no. These kids today, damned if I know. Okay, boomer. Like, wasn't it in the 70s when there was an influx in serial killers? What are you talking about? Gail finds the back exit to the police station, and she runs into Sydney, Dewey, and Tatum as they leave. Sydney acts like she's going to answer a question, but instead she just punches her in the face, which is fantastic. And it's because Gail profited off the death of Sydney's mother by writing a book. And this is where I was like, I do not like Gail, and this is why she's the real villain.
Well, and it's funny because in this scene, what I have about Gail is just her hair is something.
At Tatum's house, there's a phone call for Sydney. It's Ghostface. And he says, looks like you fingered the wrong guy again. So potentially, and there's kind of like this story running in the background of this guy named Cotton, is it Willard?
Cotton Weary.
Weary, who is the person in jail for like raping and killing her mother. Sydney had a testimony for it and is part of the proof basically as to that he's the one who did it. But there's a question really of, did he do it or not? After that, there's some weird transitional music.
No, the music is great. It is not weird at all. It's Nick Cave, and it's great.
It's weird. Billy was released because the phone records were clear on his cellular device, but also because, the call came in while he was in custody. Dewey, who's Tatum's brother, by the way, he drives Sydney to school in his deputy car. Reporters are running to her, and everyone is staring at her at school. She approaches Gail, and they have like a heated conversation about the book and Sydney's story and the story of the man in jail for her mom's murder. So that's where all this kind of comes out. Gail is sort of aggressive. Like Sydney is a child, and only a year ago her mother was murdered. So like maybe don't be such a bitch.
Yeah, that's like a recurring theme in this movie with people just like acting like Sydney should be over this already. Like her mother got raped and murdered a year ago, and she's still upset about it. How dare she?
Honestly. Inside, there's a student running through the hall in the costume because high school boys are trash, and she runs away and literally runs into her boyfriend. She says she now knows it wasn't him because the killer called her again, and he says, I know, glancing to the left like a goddamn liar. I was with the cops, remember? He's also pissed at her, so this is where what Jason kind of just said comes into play. He says, you'd rather believe I'm a killer than touch me. Like, just go jerk off in the bathroom, bro. Like, what are you doing? Yeah,
Billy is problematic with a capital P. And again, that's setting aside the whole murder thing. Just his whole personality is awful.
He says that she hasn't been the same since her mother died, and it's been a year, and it's just time to get over it. He compares it to when his mother left his family, because it's the same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
That she's alive, existing somewhere else in the world, and Cindy's mom is dead. I hate the boyfriend.
Yeah, you want to like take 5? Calm down a little bit before we continue?
No. But this is where I think we even talked about this during the movie. I was like, okay, I know that this is supposed to be, I guess, tongue-in-cheek and like purposely exaggerated, but aren't they kind of inventing the genre here a little bit for what's to come in the future? It's almost like they're making fun in ways of what comes in the future. This is very much 90s teen movie and also happens to be a scary movie. And I feel like they're making fun of the 90s teen movie, which doesn't like fully come to fruition until a few years later.
Are you talking about the sex thing?
Just his whole demeanor and the demeanor with the girls in the bathroom later. It's all making fun of itself, but itself doesn't exist yet.
I don't know. I mean, so the sex thing, that was like a very well documented phenomenon in 80s slasher movies. It's like the second somebody had sex, they died. Okay. So that's like the meta to this whole sex thing, like her not wanting to have sex with Billy. And then, we'll get there when we get there.
Okay.
But so that's where that comes from. As for the rest, yeah, it definitely seemed very like she's all that when she was in the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
My second question here, though, is would you be mad at me if the circumstances were the same here? Would you be mad at me if I was just attacked by a killer and then you came in later with your cellular device? And by later, I mean immediately after, and I allowed you to be arrested as the killer. Would you be mad at me?
I don't know.
This isn't a test.
No, I know it's not a test, but that's also like a very far-fetched hypothetical. Like, there's no reality for me to compare that to.
Would you be mad at me if I pegged you as a killer for good reason?
Well, I mean, I feel like the way that you just said "for good reason" means I can't say yes. I think that it'd be hard to not take it a little personally, sure. You know, I feel like you know me well enough at this point to know that I wouldn't try to stab you.
If there's anything I learned from Lifetime, it's that you never know who's sleeping next to you.
Tobias? That's our cat. For anybody that doesn't know.
Yeah, it's not like a third. Okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No. Meanwhile, Principal Winkler, which is not his name, but I don't remember what his real name is. He rips...
his name is Mr. Himbry.
I'm not going to remember that. He rips into the two kids who are like running through the halls as Ghostface, and he expels them. And he also physically threatens them with outrageously large scissors. The kind of scissors that if a store was opening and the mayor was there and you were like, it's the grand opening of this store and we're going to cut this sash and take a picture. Scissors almost that large.
Not quite. I mean, he was able to brandish them with one hand.
They're so big.
But they were comically large. And this scene is just so funny. It's completely unnecessary. I don't know if like they're trying to show you that maybe he's a little violent. Maybe it's like supposed to be a red herring to him being the killer. Other than that, there is no purpose to this scene. It's just hilarious.
Yeah. Slow clap for the Fonz. Sydney goes to the bathroom, and while she's in a stall, these two bitchy girls come in, and they're making fun of her and calling her dead mother a slut because it's the 90s. And
yeah, one of those girls is like a straight-up sociopath.
She's like, oh my God, her mom's just a slut. Literally over-the-top 90s Valley girl, which I do very well. Thank you very much. Once they leave, she emerges from the stall, and while rummaging through her bag, she hears something. She goes to the ground and, like, inspects under the stalls, but there's nothing. Then she hears, like, a whispered, Sydney. Ugh. And she looks again. This time, she sees feet coming off the toilet. It's Ghostface. He attacks her.
They're big black boots, just for reference, because that's kind of a factor later.
Is it? I mean, they made a point to show it, but I was like, this doesn't come back later.
Well, so later in the movie, the sheriff puts out a cigarette and he's wearing the exact same boots. And again, it's just another red herring. They just throw these little things at you throughout the movie to keep you going, oh, what if it's this person? What if it's this person?
I missed all of these because I was like, it's the boyfriend. So yeah. I didn't need any red herrings. I will say, though, this scene right here is a lesson in self-confidence. Because if Sydney had had enough courage to confront those stupid, crazy girls talking all that shit about her, this wouldn't have happened. She would have left the bathroom. Yeah.
She could have just kicked that stall door open and been like, hey, I'm right here. Stop calling my mom a slut. And then slap that girl and walked out of the bathroom, and then they could have been murdered.
So you're victim blaming?
No, I'm not victim blaming at all. I'm just saying that if she were a little more confident, this could have been avoided. It's not blaming her. It's a lesson for those who come later.
Well, he attacks her, but she makes it out again because she fights back. I should have known, by the way, that this would happen because Dewey does make a point to say that she'll be safe at school. It's his fault. Meanwhile, Dewey and Gail are like flirting, but I think she's just flirting to get information.
Dewey is so charming in this scene, though. Like when he's flirting with her, he goes like from this bumbling idiot to suave in 4 seconds. It is fun to watch.
This is where they met too, right? And like
I believe it is.
Lovers.
Yep.
Principal Winkler announces that school is closed until further notice and that there's a townwide curfew of 9 o'clock. While they leave campus, Shaggy is thrilled that school is out, and he's like thanking Sydney for being attacked, and he's planning a huge party.
Honestly, party's not a bad idea. If I were in this situation, I would want to be in a big room full of a bunch of other people and not move. Because no one's going to stab me in a room full of 50 people. It's when you got to go off on your own that things happen.
Yeah.
Being in that party, as long as you don't leave the main party, it's the safest place in town.
I didn't think of it that way. I was like, I'm not going to be at a party. But under these circumstances, teens love to pretend that they're invincible, so it makes sense. But you make a good point. There's survival in numbers. Back in his office, Principal Winkler is like putting on the mask and joking around with himself. There's a knock on the door, and of course, no one is there. Another knock, and there's no one there. So now he goes out to like inspect, and he peeks into the hall. He's grumbling about like little shits. All that's out there is a janitor who is dressed exactly like Freddy Krueger, like the sweater and the hat. And he says, "What's that?" And Principal Winkler says, "Not you, Fred," which is funny because obviously very obvious reference.
It is funny. And go ahead. It seems like you know. I'll let you say it.
And that janitor is Wes Craven.
Yep, played by Wes Craven, Mr. Elm Street himself.
Oh, okay. That's so cool.
Wait, what?
Because he did the first Elm Street.
Oh, you didn't know he did Elm Street.
I didn't know until you just said that. So now that's coming together even more.
I mean, I said it earlier in this episode, too.
No, that's what I mean.
Okay.
That's what I mean. But when I saw it and read the fact, I didn't know that. So now it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
He goes back into his office and he checks the closet, but there's nothing there. But what about behind the door, Principal Winkler?
They're always behind the door.
What jumps out from there is Ghostface, and he dead.
Yeah, great death scene by Henry Winkler. He nails the as he's dying. He just goes out with class.
Sydney and Tatum are on Tatum's porch, or are they on Sydney's porch?
I believe they're on Stu's porch. Aren't they at the party already?
That's not Stu's house, though.
The party's at Stu's house.
I know, but maybe it is.
I know, but
they're on a porch.
Real quick though, before they pan to this shot, they like show the house and they like zoom in, and there's like a stereo in the window.
Oh yeah,
and it's like one of those like 3-piece things from the 90s that like you weren't cool unless you had one of these.
Completely. And they're talking about her mom and the case, and I think Tatum kind of suggests that like maybe her mom wasn't raped, maybe she was just unhappy in her marriage. She had an affair with the cotton guy, and Sydney doesn't like this. Meanwhile, the killer is just creeping around in the bushes.
Yeah, and that shot of him in the bushes, very reminiscent of that famous Bigfoot photo, where he's just like, kind of like walking through the trees.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was on purpose, but it makes me laugh every time.
In a movie rental store, that's something no one has said in a while, where Randy works, he and Shaggy are talking. This whole conversation is basically like Randy talking about his movie knowledge and how, based on everything he knows about horror movies, like Billy is the killer because there's always some bullshit reason to kill your girlfriend. Is there? Is there, Jason? Is there?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Give me one.
Not on recording. That's evidence. I will say, as with every other scene that he's in this movie, Randy is 100% right.
Yeah.
The whole time. Like,
Yeah.
everything Randy says is gospel to this film. And I just love that about him. But I will say, when Billy barges in towards the end of the scene, like, is it just me, or was it kind of homoerotic? Like, is it just
notice.
every scene with Billy, he's so intense, and he's just like,
oh, well, because he's giving off
saying I'm the killer, Randy?
He's giving off like Johnny Depp vibes with that hair and that jacket. I'm cool. I'm Johnny Depp, you know?
That is how Johnny Depp talks.
Yeah. He's here right now.
Mm-hmm.
Dewey drops the girls off at the grocery store and they talk about Billy. Sydney has turned a corner miraculously for some reason, saying that he's been so understanding of her being, quote, sexually anorexic.
What a term. Peak 1996 right there.
But also, has he, though? Has he been understanding? I don't think he has. He told you to get over it. In the freezer section, you can see the killer in the reflection of the door. Does no one see him creeping around the grocery store? Like, what the hell? Back at the station, they confirm that Sydney's dad, who they've been trying to get in touch with, he's the one who made the calls, according to the cellular phone records.
Take a shot.
Dewey drops the girls off at the party. By the way, Dewey the deputy drops the girls off at the party. Gail shows up too because, of course. He sneaks up on Gail, who's like planning to plant a camera in the party, and she asks if she can join him while he, quote, keeps an eye on things, which is why he's there, apparently. At the party, Tatum goes into the garage to get her stupid boyfriend a beer. In turning on the lights, the garage door also opens. Immediately in my brain, I'm like, she gets killed by the garage door. It just popped right into my memory. I knew this is what was happening. There's a cat who knocks over some stuff, and he then scurries out through the cat door that's in the garage door, which closed. It's very confusing with the garage door opening and closing, opening and closing. The door into the garage from the house, by the way, also closes on its own. So once she gets the beers, she goes back to the door that goes into the house, but it's locked. And she like starts calling out to them, and she blames Randy. Everyone thinks Randy's just the jokester playing the jokes on everybody.
And let me just throw this out here. Like, is it just me, or is a beer fridge in the garage like the ultimate sign of status? Like every well-off family I know has a beer fridge in the garage.
We had a beer fridge in the basement.
There you go. There you go. That's my life's goal, is to have like beer fridge in the garage.
Well, that's what's happening when we get a new fridge. The current fridge is going into the garage.
But we can't afford a new fridge right now. Therefore, we don't have beer fridge money.
Okay, so this is a little confusing per my notes, so maybe Jason can help me here, but the lights go out, right? And she opens the garage door and the lights also come on, so they're like one and the same.
Yeah, I mean, that's how our garage door works.
Yeah. But the killer comes, like, where does he come from? He just appears?
He comes from the door inside the party.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Again, she thinks it's Randy, but Ghostface shakes his head and then slices her arm.
Yeah, and she says here, she's like, "Oh no, don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface."
Yeah.
And that's where he got his name, and that's the only time anyone says Ghostface in this movie.
Oh, I didn't notice.
Yep.
The slicing of the arm is what makes her drop the beer, I believe. And
Well, yeah, it's a deep cut.
yeah. She throws the bottles at him and tries to escape through the cat door because the garage door is closed again.
She hits him pretty good a couple times. She gets him in the crotch, she
Yeah.
gets him in the head. Like, if that's me, and those are full beers, like, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah, I noticed multiple times. I was like, this guy is getting a beating. Like, every time he tries to kill someone, or even when he does kill someone, like when he killed Casey, he's still getting a beating. I wrote in my notes, "You are skinny, but you are not that skinny," to Rose Mcgowan as she's trying to come out the cat door. But guess what? Guess what? Rose Mcgowan, because it's the 90s, was that skinny.
Yeah, she was actually too skinny.
Yes.
I noted it as we were watching the scene, because as she like tries to crawl through the door, you see shots of her from the front and shots of her from the back. The shots from the front, you can clearly see that she could just continue to shimmy out. Like, she's already got both of her arms out, and she's like clear. It's like giving birth. Like, once you get past the shoulders, just slides right out. But like, then they show it from the backside, and it looks like her left shoulder is caught on the door and she can't get through.
Yeah.
And it's really silly. It's really funny. But yeah, she talked about it. And
they had to like staple her in or something.
Yeah, they stapled her close to the door. And she said that she actually used a cat door to get into her own house after doing this scene, because she learned that she could fit through it, and she was locked out once, so she just did that.
Good for her.
Yeah, good for her. I wish I were that skinny.
Well, the killer just opens the garage, and she did.
Oh, and it's so Briana didn't really sum it up there. She's stuck halfway in and out the cat door. The garage door starts to open, and it slowly pulls her up, and her like neck gets crunched between the door and where she's hanging in the cat door. It is very inventive. I mean, like, who thought of that, you know? And it is brutal, and it's probably the best kill of the movie in terms of just like genius.
Yeah, creativeness.
Yeah. Though I'm pretty sure, you know, even though she only weighs like 70 pounds, I don't think it would actually work in real life. I don't think the garage door would lift her.
Well, let's not test it.
Okay.
People are leaving, I think, due to curfew, and so Sydney starts looking for Tatum.
Real quick, though, there's a really funny thing, just completely random, right after the death scene, before everybody starts leaving, when it's either Sydney or Stu, I can't remember, somebody's going through the house, and they're like, "Is there anybody in there?" And you just hear some girl in the background go, "Nobody here but us chickens," and then that's it.
What?
Yeah, it's great. I hear it every time, and I don't get it. I think it's a reference, like the line sounds familiar, but I don't get it.
So Sydney's looking for Tatum when Billy shows up. Sydney wants to talk to Billy, so Shaggy offers up his parents' bedroom. Meanwhile, Gail planted a camera in the living room, like TV area where most of the kids are hanging out. Upstairs, Billy admits to being selfish. Congratulations, Billy. She says, "No, it's me who's being self-absorbed with all this post-traumatic stress." No, your stupid boyfriend gaslit you.
Yeah, Billy constantly gaslights Sydney, and she keeps falling for it. Earlier, I think you were talking about when they're outside the grocery store, and she says the sexually anorexic thing.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm sure it wasn't purposeful, but in hindsight, like, that's just the abusey relationship. Like, that is somebody who's been abused that, like, is now ingrained in them that I did this, I fucked up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have a conversation about how she's afraid to become a bad seed like her mother. He says at one point, it's like Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs, when she keeps having flashbacks to her dad. She reminds him, though, that this is real life, and he says, no, it's all one great big movie. I mean, who does he think he is? He thinks he's so cool, referencing all these stupid movies. Shut up, Billy.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you're 17 years old, and you're in a bedroom with a cute boy, and he goes, life's just one great big movie, you're swooning. You are absolutely swooning, Briana, and don't you dare try to tell me you aren't.
Maybe if he was, like, referencing Titanic, but not Silence of the Lambs. I am turned off. I am afraid for my life. You're going to eat me at this point. Sexy music starts playing, though, because Silence of the Lambs gets her going, I guess. And honestly, I reject that she is giving it up to this asshole in this ugly-ass bedroom, but that's what she does.
Yeah, and to Billy's credit, he gets affirmative consent. He does. He's like, you sure? She's like, yeah.
Oh, congratulations, Billy.
Baby steps, Briana.
Meanwhile, down at the party, they're watching Halloween, and Randy is discussing the rules of scary movies.
Before we get into this, let me just ask you something completely random.
Okay.
When you were in, middle school or, high school or, maybe even elementary, I don't know, did you hear the rumor that Jamie Lee Curtis was born a man?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's just
that just unlocked a memory.
Yeah, that's one of those, Marilyn Manson things.
It's
that just,
the same thing.
Everybody heard this rumor, and it, in hindsight, it's obviously not true, and it doesn't even matter, but we all heard that rumor, and every time I see that scene with her in it in this movie, that's what I think of, because this was around that time in my life.
How do we all have the same memories without the internet? How did these rumors get around without the internet?
Chain letters.
Were we all pen palling?
No, they were chain letters. Do you not remember getting chain letters?
In email?
No, physical chain letters.
No, I never got a real one.
Oh, I did. I guess I was just cooler than you.
I guess so. Okay, so let's talk about the rules of scary movies. Rule number 1, you can never have sex. Sex equals death. Sorry, Sydney. No drinking, no drugs. Sorry, everybody at the party. Never, under any circumstances, say, I'll be right back, because you won't be right back.
I'm going to be honest with you. I've done 2 of those things today. And I'm not going to say which.
Shaggy, who is such a great boyfriend that he gives 0 fucks where his girlfriend is, goes to get another beer.
Well, he doesn't care because he probably killed her.
I know, but he's supposed to be pretending to care. And says, I'll be right back, on purpose, because he's an asshole. Dewey is told that there's a car down the road that, drove off the road, and he invites Gail to go with him to, go look for it. Back in the ugly bedroom.
Wait. There are 2 things. There are 2 things about
What?
this scene that I need to point out. One, in the van with Gail, her cameraman, Kenny, is there.
Yes.
He's eating crunchy Cheetos. He's just, holding up Cheetos, and he's just, doing a little swim with them in front of his face before he eats them. And I think about that every time I eat Cheetos.
Oh, my God.
The second thing, and I'm surprised you didn't mention this because we talked about it when we watched it, when Dewey invites Gail to go look at the car, she says to Kenny, I'll be right back.
Oh, yeah,
But-
that's right.
But if you watch the scene, that's not what she says. She says something else, but it's dubbed over. Her mouth does not match what she's saying. And I actually meant to look up what the original words are. I don't know what they were. I assume it was added when they put it behind that scene of Randy telling the rules.
Yeah.
But thought that was funny because I've seen this movie a million times and I did not notice it until we were watching this time.
That's so crazy, yeah. Okay, back in the ugly bedroom, Billy is humping all over Sydney, and she's vaguely into it.
Yeah, she did not look like she was enjoying it to me.
No. It's mirroring the movie that they're watching downstairs. And then Randy gets a phone call and reports to everybody left at the party that the principal is dead. He was found hanging from the flagpole.
Was it the goalpost?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I said flagpole when we were talking about it. And then I was like, yeah, flagpole. Goalpost. People are thrilled. I think it's supposed to be the kids that were, expelled by him. And so they, leave excitedly, running off to hopefully go get a glimpse, I guess, of a dead body.
Yeah, they say that. They're like, we need to get over there before they take him down.
In their haste, they almost kill Dewey and Gail with their car. So Dewey pushes Gail off the road, and together they roll into a ditch, leading them to find the crashed car. And the car belongs to Sydney's dad.
Yeah, and you haven't really mentioned it too much, I guess, in the synopsis here, but throughout the movie, they kind of set up Sydney's dad as a suspect.
Yeah.
They talk about it, because nobody was able to reach him. Before he left Sydney the first night, he says, I'm going to be at the Hyatt by the airport, or the Hilton by the airport, I think it is.
Yeah.
And they call the Hilton, he's never checked in. So throughout this whole movie, there's it's not shoved in your face, but just a couple conversations that are where is Sydney's dad? And I think he's the killer here.
Well, I'd argue it is, because the phone records point to him. The cellular phone records point to him.
The cellular phone records, right.
Okay, so concerned that he's the killer, basically they run off to go find him. Back in the bedroom, they're putting on their clothes, and she looks at the phone on the bedside table. It's like a regular landline phone, and cutely asks who he called when he got arrested. weird thing to bring up.
Yeah, definitely weird thing to bring up.
And he says he called his dad, but she reminds him that the sheriff called his dad. And he says, well, he didn't pick up, so he had to call again. And she just goes, huh. He asks her if she still thinks it's him. She says no, but wouldn't it be interesting if you used your one phone call to call me to make me think it wasn't you? Interesting is not the word for what that is. But also, if there's even a tiny bit of space in your brain that thinks maybe he is the killer, why did you just have sex with him?
And also, here's the thing. That call is from a police station. Do you think he's just like sitting there in his cell with a voice changer, like threatening her on the phone? Absolutely not. He used his phone call to call Stu and have Stu call her.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it just shows that she's still...
No, I know. But what I mean is she thinks that he called her.
Right.
And that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Not to defend him. He's the worst person ever.
Very severely, he asks, what do I have to do to make you realize it's not me? But the killer helps her out with that because he comes up behind Billy and stabs him multiple times.
And you see it from the rear of Billy. You see the killer like thrusting forward, and you see Billy from behind just kind of like,
Yeah. She escapes, but he loops around through another room. Seems like he knows the house pretty well. She runs upstairs, escapes through a window, falls off the roof, but she lands on the cover of a boat. She has 9 lives.
She's a final girl. That's what they do. They live.
Yeah. The killer doesn't follow her. However, she does find Tatum, square, face to face.
The weird thing is, between Tatum dying and this part, the whole party is shut down. Not a single person leaving saw Tatum in the garage.
They're stupid high schoolers.
I guess.
Sorry to any high schoolers listening. You're smart. You're listening.
Nah, you're an idiot. It's okay, though. You think you're smart, you'll know in 10 years that you're an idiot, and it's okay. We all were at 17.
Meanwhile, Randy is alone now. He's watching the movie, and he's telling Jamie Lee Curtis to turn around, and the killer, Ghostface, is behind him, so he should turn around. Sydney reaches the TV van, and Gail's assistant, Kenny, who opens the door for her. They see the killer on the video that Kenny was watching, the video that Gail planted, but it's on a 30-second delay. So I guess Kenny goes out he's going to go save him, but instead the killer just slashes his throat.
Yeah, he gets killed immediately and mercilessly.
Yeah, but Sydney escapes again. Dewey and Gail reach the house, and he goes inside. Gail goes back to the van for the cellular. She finds an excessive amount of blood on the ground, but no Kenny. She finds the Saved by the Bell-sized cellular phone, so we have officially reached Zach Morris phone level.
Yeah, and if she were smart, she would have used that to freeze time. She would have said, time out,
I know.
And then she would have fixed this whole mess.
What an opportunity.
Yeah.
She starts calling 911, but Randy pops up, asking what's going on, and she just beats him with the phone.
I mean, I love Randy, but fair reaction.
Yeah,
in that climate, you cannot just sneak up on people and go, oh my God, tell me what's going on, and I need help. You're going to get shot.
Which he should have known.
Yeah, absolutely.
She tries to leave, but the windshield is messy, and so she starts wiping it, but it's blood. Kenny falls from the roof.
Yeah, she starts to move the truck, and then she hits the brakes, and when she hits the brakes, the momentum just throws his body forward.
Yeah.
And
he's hanging there in front of her.
Fantastic.
She speeds off, but then Sydney comes out of nowhere and is trying to flag her down, but she swerves, and in that swerve, she just drives off the road and crashes the van fully into a tree. I don't feel bad.
Women drivers.
Wow. Sydney finds Dewey, but he's been stabbed in the back, and the killer comes up behind him. She runs to the cop car and locks herself in, but killer has the keys. So he taunts her with the locks for a little bit, locking both, unlocking and locking each one. Then he starts to come in through the trunk. So I guess it's a Jeep kind of vehicle.
Well, I know they don't have them anymore, but in the 90s they were called station wagons.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was a station wagon. So he opens up the back, and they do have them. Subaru makes them.
I know, I was being sarcastic because you apparently didn't remember them.
Oh, he opens it up, crawls through, but she escapes again, and she runs back to the house. She grabs Dewey's gun before going inside, and then outside the front door, Randy and Shaggy are now finger pointing each other. They're just arguing and making things difficult, and she just tells them both to shut up and locks them both out of the house.
Correct move.
Billy comes out of the room upstairs and dramatically tumbles down the stairs. He's somehow still alive. And he convinces her to give him the gun. Now, I use the word convince loosely because it basically was just all too easy.
Well, I mean, put yourself in Sydney's shoes here.
No, yeah, I am. Girl, let yourself keep the power that you have. You keep that gun.
I'm just saying.
You don't know what's going on.
As
you
far-
thought your boyfriend might be a killer. You keep that gun.
She thought he was a killer, and then she watched him get stabbed a bunch of times.
But you don't know what's going on.
I feel like you're not being impartial about this.
I'm keeping the gun. I'm pointing it at you right now. Pew, pew.
So if the situation were reversed, and you thought I might be a killer, and then you saw someone stab me, and then I was still alive, and I said, hey, give me the gun and I'll protect us, you wouldn't give me the gun? Exactly. Thank you. Moving on.
I was actually thinking of Chicago, the gun song. And I just didn't know how to answer. I would keep the gun, guys. Okay.
She wouldn't.
Once he has the gun, he lets Randy inside, who's now the only one out there. And then after saying, we all go a little mad sometimes,
That's a catchy phrase.
he shoots him. He also mentions at some point in this weird coming together scene that corn syrup was used often in movies for blood, as he licks his finger, which even though I know it's not blood, it's still disgusting.
Yeah, he says that's what they use for pig's blood in Carrie.
Yes.
In the infamous scene where they cover her. And also, I like that, like, he's almost a little like Rain Man when he says we all go a little mad sometimes, because he's like, we all go a little mad sometimes. Anthony Perkins, Psycho.
That is perfect. That's exactly what he is. Oh my God. But by the way, they did use corn syrup in this movie to like pay homage to that, I guess.
And I get that it's supposed to be sweet, but I still don't know that it would be like good to just lick off your finger.
No, it's manufactured sugar. It's like not actually sugar. I feel like it's disgusting. So it's coming together. We're figuring things out here, Sydney. And Shaggy is now here. They start taunting her with this voice changer. So they're now showing her that like, we use this voice changer to call you.
And I do have to say, like, so this scene is like, one, I mean, I feel like you just kind of buried the lead there. Like, you find out that Stu is working with Billy. He is also a killer with him.
Well, the problem is the scene was very chaotic and it just all kind of came together at once.
I'm not criticizing your storytelling.
Okay.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Thanks.
But the thing about the scene, what I was thinking about when I was watching it is when I watched this movie as a kid or a teenager, it was, you know, it was a fun, like, slasher. It's a funny movie. It's still funny to me today.
Hilarious, yeah.
Yes. But the whole thing with Billy, like, watching it now, it is so much more brutal than I remember, or than, like, I would say even, like, the tone of the movie makes you remember. When you think about the fact that, one, he raped and killed her mother.
I know.
That's crazy.
Hella dark.
That's absolutely, it's so dark, exactly. And two, just like the way he is like psychologically tormenting her throughout the entire movie up to this point.
Yeah.
It is so dark. There's nothing wrong with that. Like it's a scary movie. That's what it's supposed to be. But I feel it gets lost because this is a fun movie.
But
This,
also,
you know,
he's a teenager too, which adds, I feel like, another layer. Like, he's kind of a kid doing these very dark things.
yeah, and it also explains why like Ghostface just gets his ass beat all the time.
Yeah.
Because this is just some 17-year-old idiot.
But also, going back to what he did to her mother, I assumed he actually didn't rape her because I think the whole thing was like, they found proof that like she had been with Cotton in some capacity. So I think she was having an affair maybe with him, and Billy only killed her.
Yeah, I mean, she was definitely having an affair with Cotton, and that's like confirmed in like later movies. But I guess I just always like I never really thought about it from that angle. I just was like, well, they probably could tell that she forcibly had sex.
Maybe.
But no, I think you're right. Now that you say that, I think you're absolutely right. It makes it better because that is almost too dark a tone for this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Billy basically explains that it was easy to frame Cotton. So yeah, like Jason said, they killed her mother. She wants to know why. And he says, like Norman Bates, they had no motive. She was just a slut.
Except that's not true. Billy's just a little bitch.
But also, first of all, I think Norman Bates did have a motive. Ultimately, he needed therapy, like Billy, but his motive was always his mother.
Yeah, I think the difference though between Norman Bates and Billy and like what Billy is really saying here is that Norman Bates didn't go actively seek out these people to kill. Norman Bates killed these people because these women found themselves in this situation.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like he was purposefully saying, like, I want to go kill all these people because of this and this. Like, yes, he killed to protect his mother, but there's really, in Psycho, in the movie, there really isn't any reason given to why he is the way he is.
Yeah.
And I think that's his larger point, is you don't know why Anthony Perkins or Norman Bates does the things he does. He does them to protect his mother, to these people that he views as a threat to that, but he doesn't go out and find them, and you don't really know how he got here in the first place.
So
well, you do eventually after Bates Motel, but that didn't exist. So
I guess motive, you kind of have to have like intent.
Exactly, yeah.
And that wouldn't be considered intent.
But again, this whole conversation is moot because Billy does have a motive, and he's just a little crybaby.
Yeah. His motive is that his mother, her mother, so Sydney's mother, and his father had an affair, and that's what caused his mother to leave. So actually, he is like Norman Bates because they both have mommy issues.
Yeah, I read something that was like, daddy issues might make a girl strip, but like every guy with mommy issues is a murderer.
Yeah, I wrote that. I was like, not a good enough reason. Go to therapy. Just go to therapy. Shaggy, however, I don't think he has a motive. I think he's just a psychopath. Yeah,
I think he's a little hard up for Billy. And I think he just chaos. Like, he just wants chaos.
And through this whole scene, I was just like, wow, he's really going for the Oscar that he's absolutely never going to get. Like we said at the beginning, he is very over the top, and apparently the actor became aware of how over the top he was as he aged, I guess. But, woo, it's a lot.
I mean, I still love it, like, because this whole movie's over the top, you know? Like, that's the tone of this movie.
It is kind of funny in parts, the direction he takes it. So what ends up happening is, they pull out her dad from somewhere because they've been holding him, and they're going to frame her father for this. So in order to do that, they have to look convincingly harmed. So they're going to stab each other and then pose everything to look like the dad killed Sydney and then killed himself. In doing this, Billy stabs Shaggy first, and it hurts. He does not like it. Then he does the same to Billy. But then Billy demands the knife back and stabs him at least 2 more times.
Yeah, Billy's a little unhinged here at this point.
But he's not quite acting it. It's really Shaggy who's like losing his mind here.
Yeah, I think this is like that classic 2 bad guys scenario where, like, right as they're about to accomplish their goal, one of the bad guys turns on the other bad guy.
Yeah, or almost the fact that even though they've done terrible things very well so far, we are now reminded that they are teenagers who literally have no clue what the hell they're doing.
Yep.
They're like arguing, and Shaggy realizes that the gun is gone. So he's like, oh man, the gun. And like, so that's where it's just kind of his portrayal here. His psychotic break, essentially, is a little humorous, just the way that he's going about it.
Yeah, this is where he says, my mom and dad are going to be so mad at me. And then, like, later on, like, Sydney is talking to Billy on the phone and says she called the police. And Stu gets on the phone and he's like, Did you really call the police? Oh, man.
When they realize the gun is gone, it's Gail here to save the day and redeem herself.
But I was told she was the real villain.
Just wait. After a short, triumphant speech, she attempts to shoot, but nothing, and Billy literally kicks her out, and she's unconscious on Dewey. He tells her that the safety was on, so redemption attempt failed. You are still the villain. With all these antics, Sydney and her father have gone somewhere to hide. Shaggy is basically coughing up blood at this point, and he thinks he's dying, probably because he is.
He is absolutely dying.
Sydney has a cellular phone. And
take a shot.
Calls them. So this is where now Sydney takes the power and calls them and says she's calling the cops. This is where Shaggy cries into the phone, like, did you really call the cops? And he's literally like leaning on the counter for support because he cannot hold his body, and holding the phone and just wailing. He's drooling. It's disgusting.
Oh, it's absolutely disgusting, yeah.
Billy is losing it. He hears a noise and he opens the closet door. Sydney comes full force out of the closet with this giant umbrella and just stabs him, impaling him multiple times. In basically his last breath, Shaggy comes charging at her, and they scuffle in the living room until she knocks the TV over onto his face, and he did.
That's what I get for being snarky about their TV earlier. Flat screen, not going to do that job.
She stands over Billy's body, and Randy shoots up out of nowhere saying, like, I should be dead. Never been so happy to be a virgin. As they together kind of stand over Billy's body, he comes back to life and like almost chokes her. But Gail shoots him. At that point, Gail says, "Didn't use the safety that time, bastard." Even though she was knocked out when he said that to her. So how'd she hear it? Together, so like they're all together looking at Billy, and Randy says this will be the moment that the killer comes back one last time. And he does, even though he already did, but whatever. Sydney shoots him and says, "Not in my movie."
So badass.
So good. It ends with sunrise, cops on the scene, and Gail covering the story.
Judging by your face, I don't think you like that she's covering the story.
I mean, I guess eventually when I see the next ones, I'll see if she redeems herself. For now, unknown. Any final thoughts before we move on to the review?
No, I think I said a lot about this one today. I just love this movie so much, and I'm ready to watch it again.
I picked out a review, and the first review I read was Roger Ebert's. I thought, let's go back to him, but I absolutely hated his review. It was weird, and I couldn't even get through the whole thing. It was also very long. Then I found one from KeithLovesMovies.com.
KeithLovesMovies.com?
Yeah.
I mean, we're by no means a legitimate operation, so I shouldn't be throwing stones, but like, who?
Keith.
The most unattractive male name in the English language? Keith?
Yep. He gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and he reviewed it, I mean, obviously not in 1996. I don't think it would still be online. It might be, but he reviewed it in like 2015. The review was also long, but it was mostly summary of the movie, so I only have highlights of the actual review part. He says, Scream came out in 1996 and would revitalize horror movies to younger audiences who were not around or way too young to watch when Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger were slashing away in the 80s. Horror movies had a great run in the early 80s with the release of Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street, just to name a few. But the tsunami of unnecessary sequels, each one more ridiculous than the one before, ended up burning the genre to its targeted audience. In the almost total wasteland that followed, Scream hits theaters without much noise and became a phenomenon. Rightfully so, it's so much fun you can almost taste it. The greatness of Scream relied on 3 main aspects. First, the script, which had the right amount of flavor to it. The story is totally addictive, the dialogue is spot on, filled with hilarious and very smart references to pop culture. Second, the cast, which was golden. Campbell, Cox, and Arquette anchored the film perfectly well, with Arquette having the time of his life playing the clumsy Dewey. From the main cast, the only actor who misses the mark by a long mile is Matthew Lillard.
Boo this man. I don't like you, Keith.
As Stewart,
Boo.
overacting to the extreme in a way that's very irritating by the last third of the film.
You know what, Keith? You need to learn to have a little fun, buddy.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share this, because, well, first, the whole opening section really pulls together what you talked about, just so happens. But also at the end here, I was just like, yeah, it was irritating. It was too much.
It was not too much. It was the right amount.
What Scream did right from the get-go was totally reconfiguring the nemesis figure. While the 80s had indestructible villains like Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees and all the others, Ghostface was a very real villain. He wasn't an out-of-this-world monster. He was a person who had normal strength, normal speed, normal reflexes. He could be injured, which was one of the most refreshing aspects of his persona. And not only that, he was injured because his victims reacted to his attacks, kicking, punching, and throwing anything they could find at him. The decade of the screaming and running blonde bimbos were gone. Naturally, I liked that as well. And it was something that I specifically noticed throughout the film that I was surprised by. I wasn't expecting, particularly the girls, to be fighting back as much as they were. I expected that it would be very much what he says here, running blonde bimbos that just wouldn't be defending themselves. The characters in Scream, especially the women, were fighting for their lives with everything they had. Ghostface was a person, a serial killer, yes, but a person. And that sense of reality combined with the exaggeration of the death scenes and the theatricality of the villain gave the movie the perfect balance between fantasy and reality. The perfect horror movies for the 90s. Because of him, the entire genre was revitalized, generating tons of other movies like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend, but none of them came close to the fun Scream provided. Scream may have aged a little after 23 years, but it is still captivating. Call your friends, get the popcorn done, and enjoy the ride.
I just want to mention Urban Legend. we need to watch that movie. We need to cover
I
that.
assumed we would.
Classic. I forgot about that movie. Like, it's not good. It's not objectively good. Don't get me wrong, but it's fun.
I don't know why it's in my brain. I think someone hot is in it. Maybe Heath Ledger or maybe Josh Hartnett. Someone hot is in it from the 90s, so it's like in my brain. Or yeah, Josh Hartnett is who I'm thinking of. Or no, Pacey. Who's Pacey?
Josh Jackson.
Josh Jackson. Your best friend Josh.
Jared Leto.
Ew, I don't think Jared Leto is hot at all.
I think you might be thinking of, there was a remake. It was like My Bloody Valentine, or maybe it was just called Valentine's Day. I don't remember what it was, but David Boreanaz's in it.
No, definitely not thinking of that. That's weird. Okay. Ugh, Jared Leto. Fine, we can still watch it. All right, let's talk about our scores.
Okay. You want me to go first?
Yeah, what's your jump score?
Jump score, 8. There were good jump scares in this movie. Like, most of them were telegraphed, but they were just really good, really effective.
Okay, you track my jumps better than I do, but I only gave it a 4.
Yeah, that's fine for you. I mean, I had you jumping 5 or 6 times here.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely. There was, I mean, I didn't mention all of them, you know, in the opening scene when Casey is outside the window and she like sees Ghostface from behind and he turns around very fast, you jump there.
Yeah, I did.
That's the only one I remember off the top of my head, but there were several.
Okay. Nightlight factor.
6. It's not very high, but the gore just sticks with me. Like, that's what... Ugh.
I gave it a 5 because there's a little something there, but like, again, comparing it to the first time I saw it, I wasn't like afraid at night or anything like that.
Makes sense.
What's your horror buff score?
I mean, what do you think it is?
11.
Yeah, it's a 10. 10 out of 10. This one doesn't go up to 11.
My scaredy cat score is a 4 because, like I said, I ended up not being as scared as I thought, which is exactly what you thought. But this was like a big feat for me to watch this movie because, like I said, it was overcoming something from my youth. But the neophyte score was a 7. And that's just because I am still new to scary movies. I don't have the appreciation that people who watch scary movies do of this kind of awareness type genre. But it still was a good movie. I don't want to watch it again, but it was a good movie. And speaking of movies, next week we are going to be watching Oculus.
Oculus, yeah. That's a little under the radar. It's a supernatural movie from, I want to say 2014 with Karen Gillan, who MCU fans might know as Nebula in the Avengers.
Huh.
And it's a personal favorite.
Yeah, I have no memory of this movie.
Yeah, so I think after, we haven't discussed anything past Oculus, but I think after that, we would like some suggestions. We want to hear from you guys because, I mean, I have a ton of movies. We have a ton of movies we can get to here, obviously. But I feel like between The Others, Scream, and Oculus, we're covering 3 that like I kind of love. And I don't just want this podcast to be me gushing about movies week after week. I think we just mentioned Urban Legend. I think that's one we'll throw in the mix. But if there are any movies you guys are dying to hear us talk about, definitely drop us a DM on Instagram, comment, whatever.
Slide into our DMs.
Yeah. Let us know because, it might be hard to find a movie that I've never seen, but like I would love to find a movie that I've never seen.
Yeah.
So
we did. I mean, The Lodge, but yeah.
Well, I just mean like classics though.
Yeah.
But any suggestions, please throw them all our way.
Thanks again, everybody. And don't forget to subscribe /follow/like all of our pages.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, do share and tell all of your friends. Your support and sharing is much appreciated. We have fun with this week after week, and we want to keep doing it.
Absolutely.
See you next week.
Thank you very much.